Is the ghetto a real place, or is it something we create to separate ourselves from each other? Social class is something that exists in every society, and within these systems, people are seen differently based on what they have. There are three main groups: the rich, the middle, and the poor. Because resources are limited, systems are organized so that not everyone can have the same amount of money, land, power. So society creates structures to decide who owns, who works, and who benefits. Over time, that turns into class: rich, middle, poor, upper class, working class, and from these divisions, new labels were created. Throughout this video, I want to talk about one specific label: the ghetto. Depending on who you ask, it means something different. For some people, the ghetto is a place, for others, it's a mindset, but for most people, it's something that they just don't want to associate with. The word ghetto carries a negative image, sometimes a different form of struggle, violence, or even being seen less than in society. So naturally, people want to distance themselves from it. But what if that distance isn't even real? What if the ghetto isn't just a place, but a condition that all of us are closer than we think? Because when the system fails, when things fall apart, when life gets real, we don't act rich or poor, we act like people trying to survive. And in the moment we begin to struggle, the differences that we all have for each other start to disappear. The main villain isn't just individualism, it's a system. In many society, especially under capitalism, wealth is unevenly distributed. Some people own resources while others have to sell their labor to survive. But who should be blamed for all of this? But out of all the philosophers that talk about freedom, Jean-Jacques Rousseau's, I think I butchered his name, I really apologize, stood out to me. He believed that people aren't naturally evil, but are conditioned by society to be selfish and greedy. In 1762, he wrote a book called The Social Construct, where he explained how system of power shaped the way how people think and behaved. An example of this is if a person is put in power and believe in peace and prosperity, that becomes a system that they try to build. But if another comes in with a different ideology, more focused on control or harsh ethic rules, that will become the goal of the new system. So if society shapes how we think and the system shapes how we think, the way how we see each other isn't natural, it's learned. And that includes the labels we use, including the word ghetto. The ghetto isn't just a place. Maybe it's something deeper than we think. Maybe it's a condition that shows up when we lose only everything we have in our possessions. For example, if somebody from the middle class loses all their money and all their assets, they might be considered in the lower class or even poor. Or even so, if somebody from the rich class loses part of their wealth, they may be transferred into the middle class, all the way down to the lower class. And if that's true, then maybe we were never different as we thought, and the system is the only thing that keeps us to think that we're in. COVID-19 was a modern scare for the entire world. The disease flooded the entire world with quickness, and with that quickness, it caused us to realize how flawed our system was. Pandemic-style history has always been associated with poor people. In fact, people in the upper class always blame poverty and poor people and people in the ghetto and the less fortunate for the diseases and discomfort. But with the COVID-19, a point was made that this is in fact incorrect. Many studies conducted in Europe showcased that majority of the coronavirus was delivered by higher class elites, government officials, students who could afford schooling abroad, and unruly privileged individuals who did not feel the need to follow quarantine rules that were given during this time period. Which is why when the COVID-19 first came out, it was considered as a rich man's disease. When an article was done by the Los Angeles Times A governor in Mexico named Luis Miguel Barboso stated, "If you're rich, you're at risk, but if you're poor, you're not." This rhetoric helped introduce the idea that the disease is only here to eliminate people who take advantage of others, and in a sense, it's a cancerous mindset by poor people of how they think of rich people, that they are the disease, so they should die by that disease. As weeks passed by, the corona could be considered a rich man disease, but eventually it started entering the middle class and the lower class. You may ask how, but it's quite easy. In India, maids and drivers are known to be the backbones of the Indian society and cities. Some of these workers work in upper class and upper middle class households. When most of these workers came home, some might take the transportation or commute in cars or even by train. Since many of their employers were coming from abroad, not knowing that they had the coronavirus, in many cases, these workers would be infected by the employers, not knowing that they had the coronavirus until symptoms start appearing. In one case, a 60-year-old housekeeper in Mumbai was told by a doctor she was infected by her employer, who had been tested positive after returning from the US. Even so, another case in Mexico involved prominent business leaders who traveled privately for a ski vacation. Some of these business leaders involve banking officials, executive tequila company owners, a chairman of Mexico's stock exchange, James Ruiz Sacanston, who died from the virus in mid-April, probably after coming back from the ski vacation trip. In another case, the wealthy class in South Korea were eager to study abroad in the US, in the UK, and many other countries. But when the coronavirus hit and conditions began worse, majority of them moved back in order to take advantage of low-class health insurance because they couldn't afford it abroad. With this evidence, I'm giving a description of the first case of coronavirus to understand that poor people were not the ones traveling the world. What money and time do they have to do this? The coronavirus, in fact, made a lot of people realize that they're living in the ghetto. Not in the sense of unclean or unpleasant, but we live in the ghetto as a system, because when it fails, everybody suffers. Everybody has to go down in the lowest form of their living conditions to realize that the system is a ghetto. We are all ghetto people. Who was benefiting from the coronavirus? Forbes and the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis shows the data of U.S. corporations after-tax profits were at a high time record of $2.5 trillion in the third quarter of 2021. Wealthy executive continues to ensure returns for shareholders as ordinary people around the world suffer from the health and economic impacts of the pandemics. Billionaires actually saw a fortune and an increase in their wealth. Study done by Oxfam reported that at the end of 2020, the global number of billionaires' wealth increased by $3.9 trillion. When compared to the global workers, the combination earning fell by $3.7 trillion. This shows that millions of people lost their jobs around the world from every class of the society, rich, poor, and middle class. Who should be blamed for this? The total number of union workers fell in 2020 with jobs lost across all parts of the economic system. Who should be blamed for this? However, workers represented by unions were hit hard in certain sectors of the economic system. According to the Economic Policy Institution analysis, in retail, unionized workers gained 24,000 jobs, while ununion workers lost 600,000 and 59,000 works. This is a reflection of how unionized workers having a greater voice in corporate decision making, including matters such as severance pay in this crisis time during the coronavirus. As a group benefits, it seems that another goes down into the hole rather than being helped. Who should be blamed for this? In the late 1970s, the United States experienced an economic downturn and the beginning of a post-industrialization whereby many manufacturing jobs began leaving America for low-income countries and for workers willing to accept low wages than the average American. The reason why they would turn to foreign countries is while the average worker from a foreign country would probably want $15, the average American would definitely want more than that. And companies realized it's better to go with people from different countries than their own Americans. These changes caused an economic inequality to increase like crazy, and Americans began to wonder or whether was there a way to reverse this trend for themselves and for their own family. How did this change affect people is the system protects the ones who were on top. If you were rich and in certain part of the workforce during this time period in the 1970s, you wouldn't really be affected, but some rich people who weren't in certain of these genres would sit down in the classes. If you're in the upper class, you would sit down to the middle, and if you're in the middle, you sit down to the poor, because since there are fewer jobs given to the average American, and during this time period, the average American put so much faith within the system, mainly because of racism, mainly because of sexism, mainly because of many different sources, yet still other classes never really had faith in each other because America had the goal to cause divisions in so much way. And the only time people realize change is when their life was being affected. And after the 1970s, America hasn't been the same. The United States started to be divided into social groups or social classes, with the division based on the wealth of the people and the power that each of them hold within society. When the top categories are the ones receiving more of the opportunities in America, the moment that the system starts to form a division, stratification is invented. The system puts those with the most wealth power on the top. Slavery and the caste system is a prime example of stratification. In India is an example of a country where a caste system is slowly dissolving as education and employment become more universal. Slavery involved the ownership of some people by other people. Some might argue that in the United States there is more of a caste system than a class system, because even after the slaves were free, racial laws were built to limit minorities and blacks from evolving from the lowest class to even the middle class, and it was more difficult for them to climb. Others point to various guest worker programs that have been proposed for immigrants, including the Border Security Economic Opportunities and Immigration Modernization Act of 2013. It argues that undocumented workers with status or second-class citizen would be institutionalized through a guest working program. Undocumented workers are often exploited, working for low wages in poor working conditions. If they complain, employers can threaten to have them deported. An entire industry like meatpacking, where mostly undocumented workers making up the critical mass of employees, this threatened the livelihood and the standards of other American workers who weren't able to get jobs because of their social status in societies, most of them who end up competing with immigrants to accept less pay. The United States started offering more lower pay and benefits to exploit immigrants and also Americans. If the Americans never wanted to work, the immigrants would work, and if the immigrants never wanted to work, the Americans would have to work for much lower pay. Are we ghetto people? There isn't any right or wrong answers to the statements, but you should question the idea behind it. The system is designed to fit certain people's agenda. Evidently, people who are more fortunate with money tend to benefit more from the system. Yet, they put propaganda out in the world to create a wider form of division. If another event like COVID-19 was supposed to happen again right now at this current moment, would our life be much worse or much better? And in fact, I think it will be much worse. We put so much credit and so much structure and so much love and care to the system that does not treat us good, because we as human beings don't know how to prepare for disaster. The system is only there to protect the ones who are on top. The system is only there to showcase its dominance to people who are able to afford it. If another COVID was supposed to happen, many businesses will shut down. Many people will finally realize that there is no such thing as a structured society. Things don't happen a lot. Bad things don't happen a lot. We should never put our trust within a society, and we should put our trust in each other. I understand that everybody has a different outlook on each other, but yet still, at the end of the day, when we all rest our eyes, we will only have to rely on ourselves, because the government have shown us on multiple occasions that they're not able to do a lot, but do what they can. Thank you.